Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about of our spiritual strivings written by E B Dubois. Now, before I go into the summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. I usually upload daily on this channel, so if you are a fan of literature and you just enjoy talking about and exploring literature, this is the channel where you want to be. So basically, with this work by E B Dubois, we're talking about a double consciousness. We're talking about this color line, this veil that exists for African Americans or Black people within the United States or in countries where there is a minority population. And they have to see themselves not only through their own eyes, but through the eyes of the dominant culture. So E B Dubois, now, again, his name is very long, so I'm just going to call him Dubois for the rest of this video. Dubois is a very interesting figure. He didn't stand toe-to-toe, well, he stood toe-to-toe with Booker T. Washington. Dubois and Booker T. Washington did not see eye to eye, and their works are in some ways similar, and in some ways their works challenge each other. So, in our spiritual strivings, Dubois this is actually part from a book. It's from the book The Souls of Black Folk. And our spiritual strivings just pretty much sets up this ideal and this idea that's going to be presented throughout the book, The Souls of Black Folk. And what Dubois sets up within this excerpt of our spiritual strivings is that he tells us that at a young age, he realized that he was different. At a young age, he realized that he not only had to be Black, but he had to be an American. If you're African American, if you're not white and you're from another background or another country, when you come to the United States, you're African American, you're a Black American, or you're Hispanic American, a Latin American, or whatever country you're from, you become an American and also that. So you kind of see yourself not just through your own eyes and who you are in your own identity, but you're also seeing yourself through the eyes of other people and how other people look at you. So Du Bois kind of says this is something that's very confusing, and it's a challenge to Black people in America because you're always in this area of conflict between who you are as a person and how other people see you. Du Bois gives us an example of this where when he was in grade school, he gives this greeting card to this white little girl, and it's kind of like a class activity, when you're in grade school and your teacher gives the kids a class activity like cards or crafts, and you're kind of supposed to trade between the kids, and some kids you pick someone to give your card to. Everybody does it. So Du Bois, he picks this girl to give this card to, and she rejects it, and he recognizes that the only reason why she rejects his card is because he has dark skin. He's a Black individual, and from then on he kind of sees himself as, because he's looking at himself the way that other people see him, what the preconceived notions that other people have about him and who he is and what he is, and what he can achieve. And so there's this veil that he talks about, this color line that he talks about, where no matter what Black people do, no matter how much education they obtain, no matter where they go in the United States, it's always going to be, that's not a man walking down the street, that's a Black man walking down the street, that's not just an American, that's an African American, that's just, there's always this different way that he's being looked at, and that forms into a double consciousness, because he's saying that this veil, this color line creates this thought process or this mindset where he's not just thinking of himself as a Black man, but he's thinking of himself as a Black man and an American. And those those mean different things because of the history that black men have in the United States, and just being an American. Those can be two different things. Those are two different things, but black people in America have to look at themselves as both. And so there's this double consciousness that exists that's pretty much, in some ways, they don't fit into each other, because if you look at yourself as an American, you think of yourself as as an American citizen. You love your country, you represent your country, you fight for your country, but at the same time, your country, a lot of people in your country don't see you as an important part or an important piece of that system. So Du Bois is kind of like speaking about the plight of African Americans, what they have to go through, how others see them, and how they see themselves. Because on a daily basis, they kind of have to remind themselves that I'm not just an American, I'm also black. And that can mean that, that pretty much mean that there are some opportunities that I will never have. There are some opportunities that will never be granted to me. It pretty much means that you have to work harder than others, because you not only have to prove yourself, in everything that you do, you have to prove yourself at it, because when people see you, you see your skin, they have certain concepts and notions that they apply to you and that you have to overcome. Now, from my own perspective, I think that you can apply this to any immigrant. You can apply this to anybody who moves from another country to the United States. There are preconceived notions about every race, about every individual, about every nationality that exists in the United States. Now, the United States is a very diverse country. There's so many backgrounds and nations and populations and religions that exist in the United States. It's called a melting pot, and there's enough space for that. There's reason for that, but at the same time, I would say that everyone who's not in the dominant culture, everyone who's not in the masses, all the minorities, they have to look at themselves not just as Americans. Just even if they were born here, they can't look at themselves as American. The best way I can give you examples of this, if you're a white American, no one calls a white American. They just call you American. But if you're Hispanic, if you're black, if you're coming from any other country, they call you that the title of that country before anything else. So that's just something to think about. So this work by Du Bois, it is thought-provoking. Du Bois is a scholar, a philosopher. He really looked at and really thought about the plight of black people in America and where this was going to go. Now, according to Du Bois, Martin Luther King mentioned him. Martin Luther King recognized him as a great thinker, as a great black thinker. This is a man who he is of Ivy League status. He's a very smart individual. He was a contemporary of Booker T. Washington, and he challenged Booker T. Washington's work. And in many ways, when I read Booker T. Washington's work, and I will read Du Bois's critique of Booker T. Washington, I see that Du Bois does not approve of Booker T. Washington's work. The reason why Du Bois doesn't approve of Booker T. Washington's work is because in one of his addresses, Washington pretty much creates this speech or this compromise where he asks the United States to allow black people to have vocational work. So this is, according to Washington's work, this is right after slaves were freed. This is right after the Reconstruction era, and black people didn't know their place within the United States. And Washington comes along and he says, we don't want to take over. We don't want to Africanize America. We don't want to change America. We just want a place within it. We just want to work. We just want to provide to the economy and be a functioning part of the American economy. And he says, put civil rights and equality aside, just allow us to have vocational, a vocational education, allow us to pursue vocational jobs, allow us to work at the bottom, work backbreaking work, so that we have some education and we can work for the country basically. And white Southerners, they were happy because that takes equality and civil rights away from black people, and that keeps them at the bottom. It made the North happy, but also it shocked the North because, again, we knew of the horrors of slavery and how black people fought for freedom and independence, and then you have Washington saying, we don't need equality and civil rights right now, we just need jobs. So that kind of shocked the North and several groups. But from Washington's perspective, what I can judge in my own perspective, from Washington's perspective, I would assume that he was just trying to get rid of this tension that existed within the South, because, again, right after the era of Reconstruction, right after the Emancipation Proclamation, things were tense in the Deep South. Black people didn't have a place, they didn't have property, they didn't have jobs, they didn't have an economy for themselves. They were being rejected right and forth for certain jobs, and so Washington was like, we have to come up with a solution to where black people and white people could get along. And the solution that he came up with, the Atlanta Exposition Address, this famous speech that he came up with, he pretty much argues for vocational work. He argues for hard labor, and for understanding from the white Southerners and the North. But the thing is, like, Du Bois comes along and in later works he says that it doesn't work, and it's counterintuitive because black people need civil rights. They need education. They need voting rights. They need to be considered as human beings. There's no compromise. There is no compromise to being considered as a human being. Every human individual, every human person in the human species, you have a right to be considered as a human being with all of your rights. It's your God-given rights to be a human being, because that's literally what you are, right? That's literally what you are. You are a human being. You are supposed to have your right as a human being. Washington, he kind of, in a way, in this address say that we're going to put these rights and these civil rights and this equality talk away for now, and we're going to focus on jobs. But Du Bois says this is going to set us back. This is not, yes, in the short term, it helps us get jobs, but in the long term, we still need civil rights. Now, of course, we're in the 21st century now. Black people have civil rights. People all over the United States have civil rights and voting rights and all that good stuff. But it wasn't easy. It took us over 100 years for all the minorities that exist in the United States to pretty much get their full rights. And Du Bois, leaders like Du Bois and Martin Luther King, and you can even add Malcolm X into that, it took them a lot of hard work. And, there are a lot of forgotten civil rights leaders that we don't really talk about in history today, and they helped bring about civil rights. But in this work by Du Bois, this is from a book, The Souls of Black Folk, and this is just the veil, the color line, double consciousness. This is just the beginning of this, of his concepts, of his theories that Du Bois develops, and he's kind of saying this is how black people see themselves in the United States. Because think about it this way, this is the most simplest way I would describe it, is that when black people look at themselves, they see themselves as individuals, as human beings, but at the same time, when they interact with other races, in their minds, in their consciousness, they're thinking, am I being rejected, or am I being hired because of my skin color, or am I being hired or rejected because of who I am, right? am I being judged because of my skin color or my person? Am I, it's this, you're not thinking of that you're an individual and a person and a human being. You're thinking about your race and your person. So it's two things that you're always thinking about. How does this affect me? How do these two things apply to me? My blackness and my Americanness. It's these two things you have to weigh every day. Am I being judged on one, both? Which one am I being judged on? And that's always in your consciousness, even if when you're not thinking about it. It applies to work, jobs, opportunities, dating. It applies to everything, because if your color is what kicks off judgment, in many cases you're barred from a lot of opportunities and things that you can do. But if it's just your person, your character, that's a whole other issue. So Dubois brings about a very important and a very controversial issue, and it still exists in the 21st century today. And the best example that I can give is just President Obama's election, because the biggest issue, and I mean, although it wasn't said out loud, but his color was a heavily debated topic. And if you had two white candidates, that would probably never been an issue. So I mean, it's a way to think about how people exist in countries, and this is something that could be applied to different races and different cultures all over the world. And just in general, to think about whenever you have a country or civilization where there's a dominant culture and there's minorities, things like this always come up because everyone has preconceived notions about everyone. But again, the decisions and the controversy and the arguments and the debates between Washington and Dubois are very fascinating. And I think without them, Black people wouldn't be where they are today with civil rights. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done for everyone to have equality, in the United States and all over the world. But again, civil rights was achieved in 1968. It's 2021 right now. A lot of progress has been made in a short time, but I mean, you have to take what you can get, and a lot has been achieved. So that's the work. That's the thought process of it. That's what's going on in it. That's just like looking at the surface level what Dubois is talking about, to just get you guys engaged with this work and to see the thought process of Dubois. And that's my perspective on it. And in terms of analysis, in terms of deeper meaning in here, it's just fascinating to look at how, because before this work I didn't know anything about double consciousness and this veil. I mean, you knew about discrimination and racism and how that can be applied, but this double consciousness, it is something that Black people might not even know about. And Dubois even mentioned this. He says most Black people don't even think about this double consciousness, but you do think about it. When someone, let's say, for example, you're in an elevator and certain people, don't want to stand next to you, or certain people don't want to sit next to you on the bus, or in public. There's certain places, even though you can go in certain stores, but sometimes you might feel like people are judging you based on what you look like rather than your character. It comes, as a Black person, it comes into your mind: am I being judged because of my character or my person or my color? So it's something that's always in your mind, because you never know what's in someone's heart. You never know what's being applied to you. And you will never know, because you don't know what people think of you and what they're using to come to those judgments of you. So very fascinating work. Very fascinating work. It just says a lot about American history, Black history within the United States, and pretty much the plight of Black people. So that's all I had to say about this work. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.